John in Gary, Indiana. Hey, John, thanks for being a first-time caller. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. First-time caller, long-time listener. Very honored to have the opportunity to talk with you today.
Thank you,
I was
John.
listening to your rant as such on the reward circuitry and the brain and the connection between that as a religion with respect to politics. And I've worked in addictions before before this current career, and I'm actually also a recovering person as well. And I thought immediately about as a solution, or in terms of theory, thinking about CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and how in CBT the idea is not to change the belief, but to get the individual to recognize how their beliefs are connected to their attitudes and subsequently their behaviors,
and the outcome of those behaviors,
what they do, and then recognizing how those actions don't work for them,
right?
And looking at alternative actions. So interestingly, and Marta brought up a really good point about how, and you've been saying the party that was going to address trade would be the party that would rule the day, and it Bernie and Trump were the two that mostly talked about trade, and I think the people that voted for Trump were the people who were able to recognize that as the thing that was not working for them, and were able to make the choice based on that. So I was just curious as to, based on, when you package it all up together, what you think about that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's fairly obvious that probably the two main reasons why Donald Trump got the election. Actually, I think the number one reason why Donald Trump is going to be sworn in as president on January 20th is Chris Kobach's interstate crosscheck. And this is the most underreported story in America, that they threw hundreds of thousands of people off the voting rolls, particularly in the swing states. And those people voted on placebo ballots, on provisional ballots, and never even knew that their vote was never counted. So I believe that Hillary Clinton and the Democrats won certainly the White House and the Senate and probably the House of Representatives. But I can't prove that. All I can prove is that it's there, and somebody should be doing the investigation. But that said, back to the issues that you're talking about, John, I agree. I think that Donald Trump's assertion that he was going to protect Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, number one, and number two, his assertion that so-called free trade and, what I refer to as, neoliberal free trade, or whatever you want to call it, it was killing us, that those two things were the things that really resonated with a lot of people who, I think that, yes, there are people who voted for Trump because they are racists and bigots. They're out there, and misogynists. No doubt about it. But I think that they're the minority. I think the majority of people who went through the effort of voting did so because they want a better life. They want a better country. And they thought that's what was being offered. And in terms of their being misinformed, I lay a lot of the credit for that at the feet of our news media, who gave Trump $3 billion worth of free press, and nothing even close to that to Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders or, frankly, anybody else, and including Trump's opponents in the primaries. So, yeah, I think you're right, John. And addiction, and you know about reward circuits. If you've worked in the field of addiction, if you're a recovering addict yourself, you get it, that there are these reward circuits that can be activated, and so it's an interesting question. How do we access that? And you're right, cognitive behavioral therapy is, the big goal. One of the big challenges with CBD is that this is NLP speak here, stuff, but I think I'd be interested to get your thoughts on this, John, is that different people have different ways of experiencing time. And that some people can just sit down here right now on 12:54 Eastern time on the 5th of January and say, okay, I can easily imagine what's going to happen on the 29th of January or on the 5th of February, and what I'm going to do, where I'm going to be, all that kind of thing. Or I can visualize the outcome of this particular behavior long term. And those people tend to be very good at goal setting, and these are, tools for success. But there are other people who do not see beyond this moment. And right now in this moment, what's sitting in front of me is some heroin or a drink or, whatever it may be that I'm addicted to. And because they're not looking at the next step, which is, ending up laying in the gutter addicted, and ruined, they're not able to overcome that reward circuitry. And so a large part of cognitive behavioral therapy is basically teaching people to walk the timeline, to associate the outcome of the behavior with the behavior itself at a level that is emotional, that is deep enough that it can get down into that amygdala, into the parts of the brain that are the reward circuitry, and help people, and thus provoke the opposite response. In other words, no longer does that. In fact, Richard Bandler did a demonstration of this years ago. The video is probably floating around. I saw it when I was in London with Richard back 15, 20 years ago, with a heroin addict in a prison. And he brought the guy in, sat down some heroin in front of him and said, and here's a spoon, here's a syringe, here's a lighter, you're all set, have fun. And the guy was like, seriously? He was like, yeah, you can do it. It's an experiment. And he says, but what are you thinking? And the guy was like, I'm thinking about sitting here feeling, nodding off and feeling really high and feeling good. And Richard said, okay, what happens the day after that? And the guy's like, well, then I go through withdrawal. And Richard's like, and if you were able to do this every day for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, what happens after that? And he says, well, I lose my job, I lose my wife, and I end up here in jail. And so Richard said, now just imagine yourself in each one of those situations. And he tied that imagination to that packet of heroin that was sitting there simply by telling him to do so. And then he said to the guy, okay, you want to shoot up? And the guy said, no, I really don't. And he literally cured the guy's addiction. And, with a form of a variation, I'd say, of CBD, of cognitive behavioral therapy. What do you think, John?
Yeah, and what you just highlighted in that example is there's a program I've worked with in doing cognitive work called Thinking for Change. It's a free program that's actually given in the prisons to inmates. Mm-hmm. That teaches cognitive restructuring, and the three main parts of that is the cognitive part, getting to recognize the connection between your attitudes and your behaviors, and how the behaviors or the actions don't work for you, and right. Then learning social skills to practice social skills that
to get the outcomes you want. Forgive me my interrupting, John. We're out of time. Thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.